ability and make this valuable for your time. To me, I think this is a pretty great topic because I have been an administrator and I have been in your shoes if you're here. Is what are the top 10 best security practices or security best practices every admin should be doing in M365? All right, who am I? I'm Michelle Gilbert. I am a Teams technical specialist at Microsoft, and I am also no longer the vice president. I've been the president for over a year now for the user group here, as well as a former MVP. Feel free to connect with me, reach out through email, connect to me on LinkedIn, or follow me on Twitter. I try to post a bunch of latest and greatest things that are happening out there. And then I for a little bit, I was a Flow community blogger, which now, of course, they call that Power Automate. So I have some pretty cool solutions out there. If you're into it, that would be a great place to just check out all the different blogs and what solutions people have built that you can recreate yourself. All right, let's get started. So the top 10 best security or security best practices really every admin should be doing, in no particular order, mind you. One, know your score. And I'll talk to you about what that means. Because if you know anything about M365, it is an absolute beast. It has a ton of telemetry, as well as a ton of scores. So I'll tell you what that is. Two, the easiest one, the simplest one, enable MFA. And I'm going to break each one of these down. The third one is controlling admin access. And it's interesting, depending on the customers that I talked to today and the companies that I've been at, understanding what controlling admin access means something different. And so we're going to break that down a little bit further. Understand unified auditing. What does auditing get you? I think back in the day, you know, it would be a log file, a lot of stuff to sift through, especially if you were a SharePoint admin. And really, how has it changed now in M365 and what you should do to enable it? Manage sharing. If you were in Dennis Alexander's last session on external sharing, understanding sharing, when it comes to SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, there's definitely a lot to go through when it comes to that topic. So I'll touch on that a little bit. Identify usage analytics. Much like Know Your Score, there are analytics everywhere. And you just kind of like there are admin centers everywhere. There's a lot of analytics. And why should you be tracking that? Prevent sprawl. I came from SharePoint. I know all about sprawl. That's really was kind of a natural part of SharePoint. It does not have to be a natural part of Teams. And so I'm going to give you some best practices on how you can certainly prevent that. Then we've got leveraging the graph. That's a little known thing that people kind of close their eyes to, or they go, I don't really get that. And it's interesting because I think we've identified the reason why it isn't that well known. As I was talking to Doug Splinter in his security session earlier today, is that there really isn't a graph course, right? A graph API course. So we're going to talk to that. And him and I may try to push for the MTC to maybe engage in creating like a virtual graph API course. So I think there's an opportunity there because I think people go back to what they're naturally comfortable with, which is usually PowerShell. Govern third-party apps. I could talk the entire hour about this. As a matter of fact, I could probably talk the entire day about third-party apps when it comes to Microsoft. So I will definitely go over that pretty extensively. And then staying up to date, you know, for not just for administratively, but for security. How do you stay up to date with all the different things that are maybe attacking your surface and being able to know when there's maybe possibly new triggers that you need to be paying attention to? And then obviously, how do you react to that? All right, so those are my top 10. I'm sure there's a lot more, but underneath that, but these are the ones I want to focus on today. So the first one is know your score. What do I mean? Secure score, compliance score, and of course, productivity score. All three of these have majorly matured within the last year since Ignite. They have the new preview was announced at Ignite 2019 for Secure Score, which has now gone to GA. Same with the compliance score and productivity score. And you're probably wondering, why all these scores? It is actually extremely important to know that it's a part of what Microsoft wants to provide to you, that this is your data. We have to serve it up in a friendly way that makes sense for you, that's easy to consume, and be able to control and actually, make decisions on those controls. So the first one up is Microsoft Secure Score. I have spoken about this at Ignite. I have spoken about this in other user groups, and I think even at the M365 user group. That's because I feel pretty passionate about this. This is really about the measurement of the organization's security posture. It's something that I feel like we've had it for a while, since 2017. However, it's just not being utilized. And you can't really utilize some of these scores unless you actually include them into your governance board and operationalize the use of them, right? It's not somebody who goes out and looks and goes, wow, we're at 60%. We are failing. It's understanding really what that score is. How do you manage those numbers? And then how do you report on that? Because obviously nobody wants to give a 60% security score to an executive. So understanding how you can remove things from the score to be able to serve that up in a more elegant way. So what do I mean by secure score? This is really where it takes all those data points that are completely tracked inside of your tenant, the identity, your identity, devices, infrastructure, and of course, data. And along with that, apps. And that apps can be the third party or even or first party or even third party. So thinking through that, and I think this is quite a slide. We could probably just stop right here, but I have a lot more. It's pretty incredible to see all the points that are out there, because not only do you have all the roles that you have to manage, you have all the admin centers, if you can see in the inner ring there. Along with that, you've got what are the locations where these things are to manage. And then on top of that, what does the overall picture look like within the applications? So a lot that you have to keep track of. And I know I had a conversation the other day about how we have too many admin centers. And I, hands down, absolutely, as a customer, I felt the same way. I still do. But then I also understand when I look at the roles here, such as a security admin or an Intune admin or an Exchange admin, they're there for a reason, because those are separate roles that people have that they're responsible for. And you may not want to cross-pollinate an Exchange admin into the SharePoint admin center. So understanding that having those separate admin centers are actually very valuable, because you want to have borders around those services so those admins can really securely configure them without having any cross permission. Now, when I first started being an Office 365 admin, which was what it was called back in the day, a global admin, there were two options. You could either be a user or you could be a global admin. And thank goodness they figured it out. There should actually be separate permissions per service, and then even more granular than that. And I believe now we're up to like at least 70 different roles that you can have. And we'll talk through that. Now, on top of that, you got people like your business owners and your CIO and your CTO and board of directors. All these people, they want to understand what is your security posture. So knowing that you have to report to these people on where you're at in your configurations, in your score, where your holes might be, where your gaps might be, understanding how to do that is really, I wouldn't say easy. I would say you need to really pay attention to the secure score. And it's not just looking at the score. There's a lot deeper information than what you can just see in looking at just one page. So how does it work? So secure score, I'd say much like compliance score and probably productivity score, if I think of how the scores are now starting to rate. You have a numerator and a denominator, and you have a certain amount of points that are achieved. So within each of these, you've got all the way from Azure Active Directory to Azure Secure Center. These are points. These are called endpoints. Within all of these, there are scores. And if you can see, within each identity, device, data, apps, and infrastructure, there's a certain number of points for each of them. Now, let me ask all the security folks out there, and come off mute too. We don't have to make it just one-sided here. Would you say that you 100% of the time are secure? Does anybody feel comfortable with saying that? Okay, you don't have to come off mute, but I'll help you with this. How you could be 100% secure is if you absolutely locked everything down. I mean, let's just be really honest there. It's kind of like my house. If all my windows are locked and my doors are locked, if I had a fireplace, if I barricaded that, I think I would feel secure. But there's always a gap. There's always a chance. And so that's why you have to that actually having everything turned off. So realize you will never be 100%. You don't want to be 100%. But what this helps you with is understanding that you have risks that you have accepted. So that's kind of where you have to understand the difference of if you have 60%, actually 60% could be what your risk team, what your security team has accepted as comfortable state for your tenant. So showing you here, you may decide through the security controls and how the assessment is signaling, you may only have a 711 out of 945. So what that equates to is 75%. That's not bad. I mean, there are some students that say, hey, I love a C. I'm totally okay with that. And a lot of executives, the CTO, the CISO, they may say, oh my gosh, we're at risk 75%. That's not good. So just knowing that that's because you do have things open, because you want them open, because one, you've enabled sharing, you've enabled collaboration. Maybe you're allowing guests inside of teams. So there's a lot of things that you're doing there that does have that risk. But just because there's a risk does not mean we don't have controls that we put on top of that I'll talk to that will protect you from those risks. So applicable controls only, and the licenses do not matter. So let's walk through Secure Score. I had actually done this session one other time. It was 1 year ago, SharePoint Saturday, Twin Cities, last fall. And there were a lot of updates to some of these screenshots. So they've definitely grown more mature. But here within the Secure Score, what you see right away is 19%. By the way, this is not my production tenant. This is not Microsoft. This is my demo tenant that I really use to just go out to look at the message center all the time and then test stuff. So there's not a lot of stuff in here. I don't have any devices, managed devices, really don't have any. I have some apps I'm using. That's because I'm playing in a playground. And then, of course, I do have identity because I have probably about 25 demo users that I use that have different experiences that I like to present on. So that's why you see what you see here. But what you also, in the actions to review, you have some really great sections. You have regressed, to address, planned, risk accepted, recently added, which was not there a year ago, and recently updated. So the recently added means that there's a new improvement action that got added to the list that's brand new for you to go look at. Before you had to scroll through and go, I don't think I saw that last week when we reviewed this. So now it's actually called out. The regressed one means that there is more action that may have to be taken. Think of, you have MFA for all your administrators, and your other global admin went in and said, you know what, I don't really want MFA anymore for this person, so I'm going to remove MFA. Well, if you had a certain score that was like 85%, well, you may go down now to 82%, and you're going to see in that regression area that an action was taken that reduced your score. And really what that means is that it reduced your score because you open up more risk. So the MFA that was removed from that admin opened up a risk, and it shows that that action was regressed, and you need to go and review it and say, yep, okay, I accept that because we wanted this person to not have MFA for doing something during a specific period of time. And I probably should back up and say, does this cost money? Absolutely not. Secure Score is a part of your license. It's free to you. It is in the Security Center. So if you have the rights, if you have the admin rights to it, you can go out to it. So want to make sure. So underneath the actions to review, you have the top improvement actions. So you don't have to think about what are those things that I need to be doing. Should I be looking at a risk policy? What about enabling a self-service password reset? Does that cause a little bit more risk that we need to accept, or do I need to bring this to the governance board to discuss? Because we want to enable it, but what will that do? And really understanding in that particular identity category what that may affect. All right, here is the next tab over called Improvement Actions. This is the lengthy list. What I would recommend in the top left corner, let me get my handy dandy laser pointer. Okay, I would export it. Take this list, go to your security team, your governance team, maybe legal. I mean, I call this the, everyone in your governance board should walk through and review these and make decisions. This is not a security only because it may affect legal. It's not a legal only because it may affect network. It's not a network only. It may affect a user experience. You might want your product manager to be a part of that. So knowing that the secure score, much like I think the compliance score, and of course the productivity score, it may say secure, and sure, the security team can certainly own this or risk, but these decisions need to be made with a whole group because they do have varying effects. If you see here, turn on customer lockbox feature. If that's a project that actually gets created, then you're going to obviously need your exchange engineers that are a part of that decision to understand what it is before you say, hey, we're going to go do that. So this is a fantastic list to get started on ways that you can improve your risk within your company, or things that you may not have thought of. It also helps ramp you up on all the security actions that are inside of M365. So now, if you see here, I'm going to go ahead and click on Require MFA for admin roles, because it isn't just a list. Well, it was, and it wasn't that fun because all I got to see is now I have to go research what this action item is. No longer do you have to. You can do a lot more things. So you can actually have an action plan. So you can categorize it, like we are going to go ahead and address it. We're going to plan for this change. Enabling self-service password reset, by the way, is a very large effort and may take a year. So you may want to plan for that. Get a PM, get a budget, get a training program, get communication. So lots of things that you can do within these actions. Risk accepted. Hey, you know what? We're completely fine. We completed our self-service password reset launch. Now the help desk doesn't have to be overwhelmed with getting phone calls about, oh my gosh, I'm locked out, I can't get in. Everyone knows where to go if that happens, and they go do it and take care of it themselves. So the risk is accepted. And then you've got resolved through third party. In certain cases, you may have a different partner or a different company that handles that particular action item. And so you can go ahead and solve it that way, or resolve through another alternative mitigation. And then you can keep up with writing notes. I also like to use tags, especially if you're planning for any of these events within, you can Q1 2021, and that's easy to find because you can sort on the tag and see the ones that you have planned. So there's a nice way to kind of manage that list. You can also share, so you can copy the link and say, oh my gosh, is this new? I don't think we've addressed this yet. Let's have a meeting about it. You can also share to teams. And then of course, Planner, which is heavily getting integrated here and in the message center. And so being able to assign a task based on a response from what we're sharing about some new activity that's happening within your tenant is a really great way to easily just do quick task management. All right, here now, this is a great section. It tells you what this particular risk, if you do accept it, what you're really opening up the door to. And so at a glance, this MFA one, it protects against password cracking, account breach, elevation of privilege, the product it's related to, and then the user impact. So not only if you go ahead and change this particular feature or this action, who are the users that will be affected? So if you strip MFA, this is the group of what, 7, 10, 11 people, and you can of course click on show all users that will be affected by the change that you do. So important to note, that's actually that telemetry is being surfaced here. Along with that, implementation. It's great to see, not only, you don't have to go out to Bing or anything like that to figure out what do you do to do this. You have steps, you have links within these steps, and within each of them, it will tell you step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, create. I think if I even scroll a little bit here, it has a link out to exactly where I do this change. And then coming up here, we have points achieved. So 0 out of 10. Well, let's just say I lock down MFA for everyone. I will get 10 out of 10 points. And then this will be history. So let's just say it regressed because I pulled MFA from 5 people. Then it will show that history here that that event did change. And then here you'll see a trend over time, kind of the date and time stamp, the activity of what you did. You enabled self-service password reset because 44 fewer users were affected. And then the resulting point here. Then you've got what the category, remember the categories being identity, data, devices, etc. And then it's attributed to. So this is the point system, and as you can see, it's going to go up and down. And here is a good example of why it goes up and down, because the secure score is not about your progress, it's just about your posture, right, relative to the threat landscape. And we all know there's more threats coming into M365 now more than ever, especially Teams, when you have, hundreds of millions of people using it every day. Yeah, you're bound to find a few people that want to kind of hack. And so realize that threat landscape grows, then you're going to have to up your posture. And so what that looks like is that you have a couple improvement actions, you complete them, right? There's a ability for you to act upon them. So it's going up. And guess what? Then more come. And that's because we're trying to identify what all those threats are and react to them as they come into the system. So that's why this secure score, again, is not progress. It's not a grading system. It's just your reaction and your posture relative to the threat and the alerts and actions that are coming into your tenant. And then, of course, you've got the reporting purpose. So using the metrics on the score changes to take credit for the progress you've made. That's really what you want to do, is just keep making progress, right? Because if the threat keeps on happening and you make progress, and the threat keeps on happening, you make progress, you want that to be at an even pace. So you may settle on overall 65% is your targeted goal, but when you keep on having more threats occur, you may quickly go down in that rank. So this is something very important before you give it to your CISO. Hey, we have this really cool secure score. Educate them on what this means. And then you can also see a plan. I know I didn't have a good slide here to show it to you. I'll take a look. That blows it up a little bit. That talks to how you can say, hey, but in Q2, this is what we're shooting for based on our planned action items. And then report your results. So you've got points achieved, points regressed, and then new actions added. And that's a really good way to talk through, hey, threats happening. Signals are always trying to be attacked. This is what we've done. So this is really a good benchmark for when reporting the progress that you've made. Okay, that was secure score. So compliance score. Compliance score is a measurement of an organization's compliance posture. So if you were at last month's user group, Erica walked us through what we need to do to really set our tenant to be set up right for compliance. And you just don't naturally know where all those locations are. And so as of November 2019, that was Ignite, we did announce public preview to Compliance Score. And it is an end-to-end compliance management solution. And I believe it's now gone GA, much like the Secure Score, so I don't have to break this down a couple more times. It has a natural list of actions that you should be taking. It has very much a percent, and then it has in the compliance center, it has the very specific things that you can do. And a lot of it is related to what are all the tools that you can use within Microsoft. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you own them. So if you only have E3, you're always going to have more risk if you're an enterprise customer. So just thinking through the compliance, that's a lot more of the advanced things because they do a really great job at protecting regulated industries from having protection around their data, discovery, advanced discovery, and those such things. So when you see the compliance score there, very much like the secure score, you've got protect information, you have govern information or information governance, I like to say. You have the compliance, you have the risks that you can review, and controlling access and so forth. So this is really for focusing on data protection around what's inside of the tenant and the risks that are assigned to them by how your settings are configured. So it does allow you to see that. You can see there's much like I mentioned earlier, you have action items. You go through, you complete them, and based on really what fits for your organization. Next, we have productivity score. So if you were in Doug Splinter's security session earlier today, I did tee him up and said, hey, Doug, tell me about productivity score, because these are really the newest, hottest things as we are all working remotely. And these are the insights that transform how we get work done. Again, in Ignite 2019, they offer it up as public preview. It wasn't really much then, and it's definitely grown a whole lot now. And I think we've just put a whole lot more development into it. It is now gone GA. That means general availability. So it's to use without risk. And let me just show you what it looks like. So this is the ability. So I think Secure Score is really geared towards security team with the M365 governance team in your company. Compliance is probably geared more towards compliance, where productivity score, I think, is geared towards your product managers. If you have a product manager of O365 or M365, somebody who's measuring and managing usage, metrics, trending or training, or user experience, UX, managing the change, that sort of thing. This is for them. I mean, this is really how are people experiencing the tool set, right? The SaaS solution that they're using now, especially as they are working from home. Companies are more than ever wanting this information at their fingertips because they want to make sure their employees are, one, working, two, feeling, enabled, and being able to freely collaborate and participate and feel inclusive and feel on the go mobilely. That's really what this can provide for you, is that measurement, those soft skills, if you will, or soft reports of things that to me matter equally. And so you can see how well people are doing and how they're working together. Along with that, I'm just breaking down one shot here, which is called content collaboration. This is being able to say, these people are collaborating at their best. They're collaborating in online office files. They're collaborating externally. The percent of people that are collaborating externally. It just gives you really great data points to understand how to maybe best direct the organization to improve on how they're working together, and show gaps of possibly trainings or new offerings that you should be providing to your business users. And I can't forget, there's all those scores. This is not a score, but I threw it in because I think we don't get to see the Power Platform because it's kind of like the Office 365 or M365 sister or child, or, they're friends for sure, but they just don't have some of the same terminology. And so I have to point you to the fact that the Power Platform does have reporting as well, and you can see usage, and this gives you kind of a window into the development space and how people are feeling empowered. So if you heard earlier today, I was in a session and they had talked about, I think it was in our luncheon just before this, that there will be, according to Satya, 500 million apps within the next 5 years that people will build. Citizen developers mainly, and then, of course, other developers. Well, if that's true, guess what, for security folks or admins or any of you that have to kind of manage this whole Office 365 or M365, they're doing this without you probably realizing, because you may not realize people are doing it, or you think somebody else is managing the Power Platform. Chances are they're probably not. I've seen that too many times. And what I guess I'm pointing out here, go in here, take a look at your Power Automate analytics, your Power App analytics, get a head start on understanding how many, how frequent, what connectors, how often, who's shared, how many shared. Get a good overview of what's happening in that space, because it will only grow and grow out of control. That's the word on the street anyway. So that was my one know your score. The other ones I will go through a lot quicker. All right, second one, enable multi-factor authentication. I think we all agree this totally makes sense. And what you may not know is it does prevent 99.9% of attacks on your accounts. This is what you maybe don't know. Most data breaches involve weak default or stolen passwords. And 81% of those breaches are caused by credential theft. 73% of passwords are duplicates. And hey, I could say raise your hand, because I'm sure you don't want to, but I will raise mine and say, yeah, of course I have duplicates. I can't remember all my passwords. And then 50% of them use apps that are approved by the enterprise. Yeah, that's kind of scary with the same password. But in looking at this, and we know we all have a simple password, Cherry 101, Viking Skull 2018. I mean, there's quite a few that are duplicated all over the place. And when you think of 99.9% of attacks can be blocked with MFA, it's a no-brainer, because your password does not matter, but MFA does. So absolutely say, I love my mom 2020, make that your password. Fantastic. It does not matter because MFA is really the critical piece here. So MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. It is a two-step verification to prevent attackers from stealing your credentials. How it works, it requires two or more of the following authentication methods. One, something you know, like a password. Two, something you have, like a phone. And three, something you are, biometrics. Honestly, that's my absolute favorite. I wish that everything I could get into was with my eyes or my face or my finger. Well, I wouldn't mind if I could use a few, digits, because, sometimes if you're eating, you have to wipe your hand to get in your phone. And anyway, my favorite's biometrics, hands down, because when I log in to my computer for work, all I do is look at it, with or without my glasses on, by the way, and it recognizes who I am and it opens up. So how do you set up MFA? These are the steps. I'm not going to go through them. You can get access to this deck and the recording. There's a couple places to do it. I would recommend going to Azure Active Directory. This is the M365 Admin Center way. I'm only showing you this portion because not all of you may have Azure Active Directory or a premium license. So if you do not, this is the right way to do it. Setting up MFA, turning on MFA inside of the Admin Center, inside of users, or the other route, which is going out to Azure Active Directory if you are in fact licensed. All right, number 3, control admin access. Oh, I think that slide's out of date. 50 plus admin portals and 60 plus administrative roles. Yeah, no, there's a ton more roles and a ton more admin portals. Like I said, this deck I updated last night. I think I missed it. There are probably more admin portals. And we talked about that. Like, I know it's a pain because there's so many everywhere to go to, and what's the URL and where do you go, and why isn't the Power Platform admin portal link inside of the M365 Admin Center, and just all these things. It's because we all have different roles. The 60 plus administrative roles is what's to note there, because you want to have it locked down. And the administrative access, let's talk through that real quick. You want to limit your global admins. The reason for this is because not everyone, first off, needs to have global admin rights. As you've learned, there are 60 roles. You want to be as granular as you possibly can, but also as open to make sure the person that's getting that role can do their job. What I have found, and I think, yeah, I do see that I'm going to be talking about this in a second. So there's another role that I'll advise you to have besides this global role. Assign the least permissive role. So again, going back to saying, okay, if they are only administering or assisting with password changes, let's give them the password admin role. And then, of course, requiring MFA. As we've learned, your password doesn't matter. Make sure you have MFA. That is what matters. And I don't mean MFA for all users when they come into your doors, right? When we come back to work, into your network. Matt, I'm going to look at that, MS portals. When you come back into the network and when you sit at your desk, like, we're not asking enable MFA for that, right? Make sure you know how to enable it. That makes sense for how your users use the product. My feeling is, if you're outside of the network, require MFA, just that simple. And if you are an admin, I honestly think that even if you're inside the network, yeah, require MFA, because you're an admin. Now you're in an elevated privilege role. And as we've learned in Secure Score, there are a lot of actions there. One risk we don't want to accept is to have an admin that has no MFA, right? That's a big gap. All right, admin access recommendations. My thoughts here is really around a lot of my personal experiences as a customer, as an architect. The importance of reviewing admin roles periodically. They change, and they change because you don't maybe know everyone who's in the system. Could have been a request somebody had. It was 5 minutes. You're like, oh, absolutely, I'll give it to you for 5 minutes. You can do your thing. And then, of course, you forget then to change the role or reduce the risk by bringing it down to the password manager. Maybe the password manager had to do something in another area. And so they were helping someone, they had Exchange admin, but now you didn't really right size that role. Important to review those admin roles periodically. And I would say, whatever you're feeling comfortable with, but for sure on a quarterly basis, who are all our roles, or who all has admin roles? And do they have admin roles on their user account, or do they have those roles on their admin accounts? People, I'm sure in this room could certainly say, yeah, no, we don't really like to do that because if we have a separate admin account, we have to go to an in-private browser, and it doesn't work in our company to do that. So that doesn't work for us. So we just put the assigned, global role on my user account. Okay, well, there's a risk there. So you've got to be something that in your company, if you accept that risk, then that's a big risk to accept. The advisement here is using separate admin accounts that use MFA. So then you can, contact your mobile phone, hit accept, and then go as you are into that in that admin center. There's a lot I could say about that, but I guess I'll stop there and just say, be cautious about if you want to use admin accounts on your user accounts or use admin roles on your user accounts. There is a lot of risk involved without using MFA. All right, next one is develop a method to check in and out passwords. So I guess this is, going back to if you do have dedicated admin accounts, that you have a check-in and out password process. And what I mean by that is if the admin account is not being used, then completely change the password. Or even make that admin account disabled. Re-enable when you need it. Have a new password that you check out and put it in, use it. Then when you're done with that admin account, go ahead and disable. Basically, the goal here is no standing admin accounts, right? No standing admin accounts that are just sitting there that anybody can get to. All right, no license required for admin accounts. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people actually, license them with SharePoint and Yammer and all these things. These accounts, these admin accounts, are not for collaboration or communication, really. The one case I could say that a license would make sense is if you do have to have an Exchange account, because maybe you're writing to it for some reason. But other than that, free up your licenses, everyone, and remove licenses from those admin accounts. You do not need to be paying for licenses for those folks. All right, review PIM. That's privileged identity. That's a just-in-time privileged access. So much like I was saying earlier, this is a little bit more advanced, but this is where you go in, request for privileged access for a specific period of time, and it will automatically turn off at that time when it expires. All right, this is the one on my last slide that I'm like, ooh, do I have it? This is use global reader role. This is my highest recommendation to say global reader role is like being a window shopper. Okay, I pushed for this global reader role 2 years ago through request, through having everybody else support me in requesting this, because I was going through being an architect in a company, coming from having global admin in where I'd been to now not seeing anything. Well, how do you drive architecture without seeing any of the configurations. So global reader role is much like global admin, but now I see it through the lens of I can't touch, everything's grayed out for me. This is where you assign your global reader role to your user account. Because the majority of the time, I mean, let's just be honest, we're not making changes. I mean, there's only a few people that are making changes. Because once you set that conditional access policy, guess what? It's done. Once you get your teams configured in your admin center, that's kind of done too, unless we add something like preview features, which I'll show you at the end, that you may have to configure. But other than that, you're usually going in to just maybe see if something changed. You might be looking at logs. You might be looking at a configuration. How did we do that again? Or looking at a policy. Well, guess what? Now you can really reduce your risk. Instead of using an admin account, getting a password, opening up the risk to go look at something, to then go and walk back that process, just have the global reader role on your user account, and now you have read access into most admin centers. Mind you, it's a newer thing. I think they're now 3 layers deep. And what I mean by that is, let's say my user account, Michelle Gilbert, has a global reader role. If I go into Azure Active Directory, or let's say I go to Azure, I can go into Azure Active Directory, I can go into groups, and I can probably open up the security group. So they're about 3 layers into all that capability of just being able to see. So I advise you highly, if I can underline anything, this is my favorite thing that's happened in the last couple of years. And so it really is. Okay, understand unified auditing. This is my 4th one. And all I want to tell you about this, turn it on. Frankly, turn it on. It's interesting. You'll see folks that just haven't even turned it on. And the capability you get with auditing, it's not like this boring log file you have to sift through. It's actually interactive. If something happened during a period of time, maybe it was last Saturday, from noon until 5, somebody reported something, I can actually go to last Saturday, noon to 5, and then I can open up this huge area here and look at all the activities. So let's just say something happened for an admin inside of Microsoft Teams. I can go in that log file and I can actually read what may have happened. So my big thing about unified auditing is that it is unified. If you look at all the locations that you can see things, this is where Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, which is now Power Automate. I probably just don't have a screenshot for that. This is where the Power Platform actually is combined. So I think when they say unified, it really is unified. So all the way from Azure Active Directory to Sway. And so turn that on. That's, to me, just almost like MFA. Enable it, turn it on. Manage sharing. I'm not going to dive too far. I think this is also one that, as a global admin, SharePoint admin, OneDrive admin, if you are that, or even a Teams admin, you have to understand external sharing. I think the Exchange folks do, because it's open, right? People can email each other, and they can email attachments, and you can have rules and policies, but that's been going on a long time. It's the new concept of, hey, but if I have a guest in Teams, how do I enable sharing? Or, you know what, I just want to have OneDrive. We're just going to pilot that. Can we do that? Understanding external sharing is really key. So in the SharePoint Admin Center, again, another admin center, but it's because it's only for a SharePoint admin. I believe the Teams admin can't get in here. So they're going to have to be best friends, a Teams admin and a SharePoint admin. I'll say chances are they're probably the same person. But under sharing, you see external sharing. So you have most permissive to least permissive. And in here, you can say, you know what? Only people in your organization is who you will allow to collaborate together, which is great. However, what about all the other clients, vendors, guests that are out there that you want to collaborate with, but it's all locked down? Again, we're talking about risk. Bring your security folks in there, because you do need to talk about what do we do and how can we lock it down. because it isn't a turn on switch. It is okay, we can limit it by a domain. We can make sure they have to sign in with a specific account. We can allow them to share, or we can block them. We can send the link, but maybe put expiration on it. So there are things, when you think of each risk that you take, there are settings and configurations that you have to understand that might actually combat that risk. Because if it's a trusted domain that you're connecting to, then that's an agreement that's already been made, and let's do it. And let's enable that collaboration. All right, so that's sharing. Now let's look at identify usage analytics. There are so many things to talk about here. I would say I'm going to go through it a little quick because we're in a security track. We're not in a usage analytics track. But all the places, just for the mere fact that why I have this particular slide in here and why does it why is it a part of my top 10 is because you have to know how people are using the system. Simple as that. Are people active? Well, if there's no activity, well, I guess there's not a lot of return on investment for that product, right? There's a few things that why you would monitor it. Guess what else you can do? Not only can you see activity, you can see file storage. It's not just the user portion, it's the storage portion, it's the mobile portion, the device portion. But here's what M365 Admin Center reports look like. I believe they're 180 days. They're pretty top level. You could drill into them a little bit, and each one of these. So all the products here, you can see they're not Power Platform because these are all within the Office 365, Yammer, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and so forth. Well, if you want to go specific, you're going to have to go to that location. So the Team Admin Center reports, which is growing quite a bit. I think there are 6 or 7 reports now. This is where you can see under the analytics and reports, usage reports. So as you can see here, you can go in and even by team, take a look at how many people are in there. How does this relate to guests? Because you can see how many guests are actually in this team. So if you're monitoring your external behavior, you can actually easily depict how many guests are in that team. And then in the audit log, you're tracking them. So you can monitor that too. What you see here, the date range, that's about 90 days. So if you think about between the two, 180 days and 90 days, that doesn't really give you a lot. So I'll talk about what else you can be using. And here we've got analytics, in case you weren't aware. Within each team, under Manage Team, there's a tab for analytics. You can see the number of users, the number of apps, meetings. This stuff is pretty fun. This is the engagement portion. And then you can see also the number of guests and files. All right, to me, this is the cream of the crop. This is the M365 usage analytics. This is a Power BI report that actually is already built for you. The only thing you need to do is go to your M365 Admin Center and connect it. And so you need 1, you need to know your tenant ID. 2, I believe you still need to know or have a Power BI Pro license. If I'm not mistaken, at the time, it was like $6 a month per user per month. Well, you just need 1 because obviously you just need to connect it. And once you connect it, you're all set. And now all the telemetry of your tenant will start flowing into these subsections for you to monitor things like adoption. But for security folks, you probably aren't that, interested in it. You might care about usage. You might care about mobility. Especially if you're rolling out a Teams app deployment mobile project, you might want to monitor that, keep an eye on that usage. So there's all kinds of reasons here. I'm not going to drain this slide that much. I'm just going to show you there's multiple reports you can get out of the usage analytics, adoption overview, product usage. I love the storage one because what if all of a sudden 500 gigs were taken down on a particular day? What do you think? Maybe that's something a security person might want to know about. So storage use report is always interesting. But what if a terabyte gets added? Did marketing just move their file share of PSD files to the cloud? So, that's always a possibility, but it would be nice to know and have that planned for, because that's something that you should be alerted if you see those large file sizes downloaded and uploaded to the tenant. Of course, there's communication reports. How well are people communicating in Skype or in Teams, whatever they're using? Collaboration report. And this one's interesting because it's about collaboration, much like the productivity score I showed you. This one is collaborate on files. Departments, different departments collaborate together more than other departments. But not only that, the guest collaboration. So talking again about the security portion. And we have Office activation report. How many people have Office activated? So meaning Office Pro Plus, now known as M365 Apps for Enterprise, just to throw you all off. And then access from anywhere report. If I'm in security, I definitely want to know, is somebody in China accessing? Do I allow that? Again, it's all risk. Do we say yes, that's totally normal? Okay, perfect. And if it's not, hey, I want to know about it. So the access from anywhere, if you see this map right here, I want that map sitting up on my screen all the time. I want to know, I want to get alerted if somebody is in somewhere just that isn't defined for where our offices are located or where our partners or where we communicate to people. So if they're in Antarctica, I want to be alerted because obviously somebody's doing something in Antarctica, of course. And then the service usage report. We all want to know if services ever go down within Office 365 so we can monitor and manage that. And then service user activity report, right? Per user, what are people using? Back to what I said earlier about Power Platform, keeping up with all those developers out there, that's something that's a challenge right now that you didn't even know you had. So now you're probably going to walk away today going, oh, I know what I'm doing Monday. So that's Power Platform. But here, Service User Activity Report, this is actually where monitoring the Office 365, for a better way to say it, but the tools that are Exchange, Yammer, SharePoint, and that activity. So that's actually really good because that user activity report will tell you specifically who the user is that did upload the 5 terabytes of data last weekend. So you can get to see that. And of course, I had to add in Azure AD application activity. Again, just going around looking at insights, there's so many, but this one's really good because it helps you. I tend to monitor the failed sign-ins. I want to know when there's a bad experience because guess what? If there's a bad experience, you're not going to tell me. You're going to go use WhatsApp, or you're going to just text somebody, or you're maybe FaceTime them. So, this is a good check to say, hey, I don't want shadow IT. I need to keep track of the failed sign-ins, and how to do that is going here and reviewing those connections to those applications. All right, prevent sprawl. Oh boy. Manage O365 group creation and expiration. I think we may have had a few topics during this conference on this very thing. It's a philosophical conversation if you ask me, and it depends on the requirements or compliance, security, regulatory compliance within your organization as to maybe where it should go. But there's 3 primary models for managing the group creation. One is open, meaning users can create their own groups. It's kind of like self-service site creation. I know for all you SharePoint admins out there, you're probably saying, nope, never again. We're never doing that again. I know what that meant. Then you've got IT-led, which that's what a lot of people do too. Hey, I'm in IT. You come to me, you ask me, and I say, okay, and then I do it for you. And then you've got controlled. You've got one group. Maybe you actually have a group within your organization that is restricted, that are the people that you trust that can create them. So maybe they're the business line owners or they're admins. Anyway, it's a subgroup that can do it. Pros and cons about all of them. Well, what I'll tell you I lean towards always is open collaboration. My biggest argument for open collaboration is that you have what's called group expiration. And when you think of Teams lifecycle management, it is not SharePoint lifecycle management. SharePoint, we couldn't turn off, we couldn't throw away, because chances are we didn't even know who owned it anymore. So there's that. And it grew out of control and it sat under this section. It was a subset of a subsite. So we left it alone. Teams is not architected that way at all. You know, it's very flat. You got a team, you got a team, you got a team. You have owners, you have members. That's it. It's really simple. It's open collaboration. It's meant to be that. It's not a view-only model that SharePoint had. And it does have the lifecycle management built into it with group expiration. So I guess what I would lean towards always is open, but I do understand where customers do need to have a little more lockdown. And if you do, hey, we got a Power App for that. So this is a cool request a team Power App that's out on GitHub that I could probably dig up. I might have it in my notes how to create this. But what this does allow for is it enforces maybe a secondary owner. It has a built-in guest access request process. It enforces business unit metadata, classification, so labeling, whether you want to have a team template. Maybe you want to have only 4 templates in your entire company, and that's all they get to use, nothing else. This kind of stuff is perfect for that. But you know what? Maybe this is perfect for a specific business group and everybody else can openly collaborate. So just think through it, because once you go down that route, you know, that's the last thing you want to do is have the 3 people in IT be the ones who create teams all day long and all day long. And guess what? If they don't get the team within the time that they expect, they're going to go do something else anyway. All right, fine. I guess I'll just go and, you know, I'll text them my file. So be cautious when you think through it. But you can set group expiration. So if you think of, hey, you know what, we can have it open, but we're going to lock it down to say 180 days. Here's the email we're going to use if there is no owners, and then we're going to enable expiration for specific groups, all groups, or none, which to me is the opposite of what you're doing here. I'm going to set it all up and then say none, but you know, okay. And groups that are actively in use are renewed automatically. So this is a highlight. I just want you to know that it doesn't mean 180 days it just deletes. You'll get contacted 30 days, 15 days, and a day prior, but you will not get contacted if you have activity. So I think it's pretty important to go, if somebody's in the SharePoint site, if they're doing something, or not even the site, but in the Files tab, if they're in Outlook, they're reading through a message, if they're visiting a Teams channel, that is considered activity. So it does auto-renew. What we really mean here is a team that just went stale. It literally went stale. Think of those orphan SharePoint sites. Like nobody's touched it, but guess what? It wasn't that easy to know back then if it was touched or not. And so you'd have to go through the files and see, was there the last modified date? You know, it became difficult. Here, guess what? This is natural. You know, and I know you might be concerned, well, what if we lose the data? Okay, we'll start talking about classification labels or sensitivity labels. Say, you know what? If it's public, then let them life cycle out. If it's sensitive, hey, maybe we do a different policy for that and we archive them at the end and make another decision. So understanding group expiration is important. All right, the next one is leverage the graph. Again, I don't think this gets enough love. A lot of people probably on the call are PowerShell fans. including me. But the Graph API is really the interface to everything. And here's a pretty good slide, I think, that does that. So if you want to connect to Azure AD and Excel, if you were in Doug Splinter's keynote today, you probably went, what? You can do that? That's a lot of connecting. That's Power Automate. And so just the capability of the underlying connecting points is really the Microsoft Graph API. And so think of it really leverages all those, and then the supported languages and platforms. So if you're a developer and you're like, yeah, well, I only like Java. Yeah, you're good. Hey, what if I want to write to maybe a Android? I want to for the Android OS. I want to write this application. Yeah, you can. Python, of course. So just thinking through the flexibility of the graph, it goes above and beyond what you can do in PowerShell.
Hey, Michelle, there was a question a couple minutes ago from Matt as well on recommendations for digging into application usage and insight failures.
Yes, application usage and insight failures. That's going to be in Azure Active Directory in the app. I think it's app Cloud monitoring. Apps. If you can dig up, Doug, a link to help, that would be great.
Are you talking cloud app security or?
No, that was the app. Let's see, I think I was referring to the enterprise application sign-in activity.
Oh, yep. Okay.
And if not, Matt, ping me too, so I can answer that for you. So some of the deeper things within Microsoft Graph, you have onboard users, easily integrate with Excel, find meeting times. And these are just templates, right? There's so much you can do, but this is just think of the onboard user. I mean, just that process alone, if you can automate that, I mean, just to save time. I mean, that's really what the graph is for. How can you save time? How can you automate? How can you alleviate any manual process? Well, guess what? If you do want to block self-service site creation, you can do that by creating a Power App and grabbing Power Automate and Graph and really automating creating that process. So thinking through, if you do have situations like that, check out the Graph API and start playing with it. A little bit more about it. This is just a snapshot I took, but it does access to objects like users, groups, messages, calendar. You can do, I mean, the whole API, there's a whole list of commandlets that you can do, like create a team and template ID equals. So think through, some of that automating. It's querying data from a lot of different places, Exchange teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, OneNote Planner, and Azure AD, and I think that list is growing. I did hear once that if you had your pulse on the Graph API calls, you may see things that are in preview before you would anywhere else. And why? Because they have to be naturally in the graph before they can get launched. So something to think through if you are somebody who's trying to stay on top of change or you love sneak peek stuff. You can find that within the Graph Explorer. All right, govern third party. I know I'm at 17, 18 minutes left. Gosh, it's gone by fast. Govern third party apps. There's a lot to say here. And
sorry, one more thing from Ben about group expiration.
No, it's not retroactive.
Okay.
That's a great question. Will it be retroactive? No, it's all net new. However, if I'm not mistaken, you may be able to go back in the group expiration and under the select it specifically. So that might be something you might want to test. All right, Microsoft Teams and understanding policies. In case you didn't know, there are actually 13 policies per user, but there are settings that are tenant-wide. So in the org-wide settings, that's really where you block third party. And the global app permission policy, that's a per user. That would be setting your Microsoft third-party and tenant apps. And I'm gonna go through these kind of quick. Then you've got custom app permission policy. Again, this is your Microsoft third-party and tenant app. So there's global, there's custom, and then a custom app policy again for your org-wide team and user. So let's take a look at it. So this is org-wide. This is what you can do. This is where you can say, I allow third-party. It's a switch at the top. Basically inside of a new location called Manage Apps. It did get moved. I believe before it might have been in permission, but now we have a new section for Manage App. This turns it on and off. This does not mean that they get it. That just means that you're allowing it inside of your tenant. And then here, allowing any third party published to the store by default. Be careful to that because you might have a lot of people who can create apps. You may not want them to put it by default to your own store. And then, of course, interactivity. Allow interaction with custom apps. Is tenant-wide, and then, of course, you can granularly allow people to create. All right, this is a global app permission policy. Anytime I say global, that means that's default out of the box. Each one of these, you can create a custom. That's something that you have to decide if you require that, especially if you require to have different user experiences per persona. I know a lot of organizations now are creating 3, sometimes, 4. One of them is for the deployment team or the IT folks who are rolling out teams. Guess what? They get everything turned on because they have to test things, and that completely makes sense to me. Then we have a second group, and those are your knowledge or information workers. They may have a completely different use case. You don't want them to have everything. They may have specific apps that's been approved for them. And then, of course, you have maybe first-line workers or frontline workers, too, and they may have something a little bit different, too. So what you can do is you can lock down the apps based on who they are or what persona they are, and you can change the side rail. So the experience in Teams, whether they're in the desktop, web, or even on the mobile device, you can be prescriptive about what applications are located in both of those locations. So thinking through, just to note again, global means default. I would not roll out with global. I would roll out with reviewing all of them first and making decisions based on how you want the end user permission and experience to be. This is what it looks like when you create a custom one. I called this first line worker. I said, yes, absolutely. You can have all the Microsoft apps in first party, third party. No, absolutely not. It's too much of a risk. Going back, I think our theme today is risk. You only get Chronos, period. And guess what? You do have 3 custom apps because we have a new Power App that we built called Staff Check-In. We need you to check in at the beginning of your shift and at the end and have a recorded temperature. We also have Contoso Landings, which is our intranet page. That is also pinned to the side rail. And then we have Teams training because we want to offer that. And these are actually SharePoint sites we've wrapped around in an app. It looks like an iframe that we posted on the side rail. This is the experience for a first line worker. So here's the 13 user policies that you get. And as you can see here, this is the app permission policy, location. And this particular person, Alex, he's a knowledge worker, and he gets the app setup policy. So if you see there, it's not global. It says Contoso org-wide rollout. So the name of the company is Contoso in this case. So you can either assign the policy here, which is great if you're a company of 50. Doesn't work so well if you're a company of 50,000. So we do have PowerShell for that. And so you can use the Teams Admin Center or Skype for Business PowerShell module to assign a custom policy to groups of users or security group or distribution group. All right, custom app policy org-wide. I did talk about that, so I'm not going to drill into it. Custom app policy. This is important here because in the Teams Admin Center, when you manage a channel and you're the owner, of course, you get the settings section. You can actually still be more granular and say, no, I don't want any members to upload custom apps. So that is a granular control. And then, of course, best practice, I always say, create a setup policy for your admins to review new apps requested in your company. So maybe something for you to look at, but you definitely want to be able to have a review process as people are requesting applications. All right, SharePoint store. I'm not going to forget how to use SharePoint. I know we're very Teams oriented today, but what I do, I guess, want to call out more than anything is this guy. It still exists. So if you have it on, by default, SharePoint Online is configured to allow users to get or request apps. And when you think about, okay, do we really want them to? Absolutely. And it wasn't actually easy for me to get here. It's really not site contents, your apps. I think I picked around, I was going to add an app, and then that's what happened. So when you click on SharePoint Store, this is what you get. And much like Team Store, let's just be honest, much like the Windows 10 store, the Office add-in store, I mean, we got a lot of stores, but they can get access to things. And they may not be able to buy anything, you know, in that matter, but you want to be deliberate about having this turn on or off. And then we have SharePoint web parts that are shown up for everyone. So if you see here, you may decide, guess what? I actually do not want Bitbucket to be an option for people to add to their SharePoint page. Here's a list of all the modern web parts. You may not want people to have Kindle Instant Preview as a web part. Like, it's just goofy. I mean, it's super open and collaborative, but I know there are some companies that say, no, we don't want YouTube as a web part because it'll take down our network. So think through for security and for admin people. If you do want to remove that, you can actually quickly hide it with PowerShell, just disabling a web part ID. So pretty easily go in there, hidden from the toolbox equals true in JSON, and therefore now it's not going to be located as a option in your web part toolbox. So just showing you there. If you feel like there's risk, you can lock down those web parts. All right, here we've got Power Automate with 9 minutes left. We're going to go through a quick, just understanding environments. You can have separate environments. My suggestion is to always have a demo environment. Play with that. Understand creating data groups. Again, this is related to, you may have data loss prevention policies that you want to have in place. And by the way, I'm not moving this. This is doing it on its own. Sorry, I'm not trying to go this fast. Okay, stop it. All right. It says your flow was created but is currently suspended since it's using a combination of services that conflict with the company data loss prevention policy. Okay, what that means basically is you need to think about setting up, like I mentioned, these apps are going to grow, your Power Automate's going to grow, creating these DLPs in place to say what data, what let's see, I guess connectors that are allowed to be used within your company. So locking it down, the apps inside of the team store, but I'll also locking them down here inside of Power Platform Admin Center. Okay, staying up to date. Manage the change, for God's sake. Even hearing probably me talk, you're maybe a little exhausted. Here is just really about where do you find the change, because it is hard. Before it was super easy. We had 18 and 36 months before a new Office 2003 was going to come out. It was super exciting, right? So it took a long time to plan this stuff and to roll it out. There was an impact for sure. We had to train people. Holy cow, the ribbons changed everybody. Watch out, you're gonna lose where your print button was. Yeah, I think that was a long time ago, but guess what? Not a lot of companies could actually afford that. And so they skipped the update, and there's a heavier impact. So this is really the Office 365 change model. It's this continuous improvement, making the transition easier. but how do you get there? And how do you understand it? And so a lot of it is through understanding what these targeted release groups are and these monthly channel groups are. So you're going to get this deck. I'm not going to cruise through fast, but I've got to get to my end here. There are channels, meaning M365 or Office 365, that gets rolled out to you as a client. Your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Teams client gets rolled out with what's called a channel, meaning that's a period of time or a version, if you will, of what features comes with it. By default, semi-annual enterprise is what it's been. That means that everybody that has it today that didn't ever change the setting automatically is 6 months behind. So knowing that doesn't mean security, because they still get security updates, but that means feature. So managing change by bumping those up through GPO is really the way to go. And you can even get them scheduled every month if you want to be like on the cutting edge. You can learn about what's new inside of the M365 Admin Center. You may not have known that there is a section under settings, org settings, and services that actually call out the version, the change, and what it applies to. I think that's a little hidden gem, if you ask me. Here's release preferences. So if you want to set your end users to targeted release, you can do that in the Admin Center again, settings, org profile. But these are the rings that Microsoft rolls out. There might be in between 2.5, 3.5, that sort of thing. Just note that if you needed to be in one earlier, you certainly could be. And it allows admins, it allows security, change managers to prepare for the updates that are coming and to test them out. Where do you find change? I always am a champion of the Message Center. That's the primary channel for Microsoft to communicate change. So I live in there and I communicate those top items in our user group. Lots of things here, how to have Microsoft communication schedule. So think of these channels as a place for you to learn more about how to stay on top of change. User voice, I'm going to point at that one. I'm going to point at the roadmaps. Honestly, the roadmaps are so important. They help you know what's coming down the pike in the secure space. Paying attention to your MVPs. Everyone today that was at through O365A is an MVP. That means that they are an evangelist and an expert in their field. And the new Microsoft Teams preview feature that I'm ending with on this particular slide is update policies. This is what was announced at launch 2. But if you go into Teams, in the Teams Admin Center, of course, and look, you're going to have a global org-wide default. What this means, it's a brand new policy to say, hey, by default, no one gets preview features. But guess what you want to do? You want to say, hey, what about the deployment team? They probably should know when something's coming to Teams first, right? So we can plan and be as secure as possible. So go ahead, add, and have a new custom policy for that deployment team or IT or whatever you want to call it, and then enable the preview features. So that will set you up to be more secure, to learn about what's coming, and to stay on top of the change before it comes to you and understand your risk. So that is all I have, and I have 3 minutes to spare. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. And honestly, if you have any questions, feel free, reach out to me. I have a ton of resources, but with that, I'll go ahead and take a look or ask Doug, are there any questions? Is everybody asleep? All right, Doug might have probably is maybe getting ready for his session. Oh, there you are,
I was
Doug.
on mute, sorry.
Okay.
Nope, I'm here. I didn't
Okay,
see
great.
any other questions though. I was dealing with a cat.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's a cute picture you have.
Oh, thank you. I do have it right here, but it's in a cone today.
Oh no, what happened to him?
Oh, she likes to chew on her leg.
All right, so there's a question here. Best practice for a demo environment. Let's see. I would say you could get a trial if you want to play for a little bit. Free trial for 30 days, and I think you can renew it for 45. So depends on what you're doing. Or you could just buy your own. I think that could be another thing. But anyway, thank you, everyone. I want to be respectful of Doug. He is next, and I appreciate I appreciate all your time. I hope you learned a lot about how to secure M365.
This is very good. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
I will end your recording real quick.